What if you could, like, take stress and actually use it to fight diseases?
That's an interesting thought.
Well, there's actually a company that's doing that.
Oh, wow.
Corcept Therapeutics.
Yeah.
They're really focused on something called cortisol modulation.
Cortisol modulation.
Yeah, and they're developing some pretty cool, innovative treatments for a bunch of things, like Cushing's syndrome cancer.
Interesting.
So in this deep dive, we're going to like really analyze Corcept Therapeutics. We're going to look at it through the lens of value investing,
Okay.
kind of like how Warren Buffett would.
Like a long-term strategy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Long-term value investing. And the cool thing is we have this in-depth report that we're going to be using.
Oh, great.
It's called Deep Dive, Corcept Therapeutics Analysis. Very clever title.
Yeah.
But, yeah, lots to unpack here. So if you're into this kind of stuff, make sure to hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, don't miss out.
So you don't miss any of our future deep dives. All right, let's jump into Chapter 1, Understanding Cordycept's Business.
All right, so Corcept Therapeutics. It all comes down to something called cortisol modulation.
Okay.
You know, cortisol, it's the stress hormone that everyone always talks about.
Right.
It gets a bad rap, but it actually plays a really critical role in a lot of your bodily functions.
Oh, interesting.
And what Corcept is doing is they found a way to modulate its activity so they can fine-tune it to treat all sorts of diseases.
Well, so they're basically taking stress and turning it into a weapon against disease.
You could say that, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's pretty fascinating.
It is. And they've actually built a pretty impressive portfolio of over 1,000 proprietary compounds that can selectively influence how cortisol interacts with different parts of your body.
1,000.
Yeah, it's a lot. And their current, like, moneymaker is something called Korlym,
Okay.
which is the brand name for mifepristone.
Mifepristone.
Yeah, and it's actually the only FDA-approved drug that's specifically for treating hyperglycemia.
Hyperglycemia.
Yeah, in adults with Cushing's syndrome.
Cushing's syndrome.
Which is basically a condition that's caused by too much cortisol.
Oh, okay.
But the really cool thing about all of this is that this is just the beginning for them.
Okay, so they have this drug for this specific condition, but, like, how does that translate to a bigger picture? Like, where do they fit in the entire market?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So they're operating in two markets that are extremely lucrative and that are growing really rapidly.
Which ones?
Oncology and endocrinology.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea, the oncology market by itself is projected to be worth almost $500 billion.
$500 billion.
Yeah, by 2028.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
It is a massive market.
Yeah.
But you're right, the pharmaceutical industry is super competitive.
Extremely.
So how are they holding their own against these giants?
Yeah, like Keva Pharmaceutical and Recordati.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great question, and that actually brings us to their competitive advantage.
Okay.
What makes them stand out is their expertise in cortisol modulation. It's very unique, and they've been very smart about protecting their intellectual property.
Okay.
They actually won a big patent case against Hikma Pharmaceuticals.
Wow.
And that gives them market exclusivity for Korlym until 2034.
That's a while.
It is. That's a huge window of opportunity for them to establish themselves and develop their pipeline.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the legalities.
No.
They also have some cost advantages that are already giving back to investors.
Oh, wow.
Their stock price has actually increased by over 15% in the last 12 weeks.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So they have the science, the unique product, and they're in a growing market.
Exactly.
But what about the people running the show?
Right.
Let's move on to Chapter 2, Management Evaluation.
All right, so this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
So their CEO is Dr. Joseph K. Belanoff.
Okay.
He's actually been leading the company since 1998.
Wow, it's a long time.
It is. He's got a really phenomenal track record and a lot of experience in the pharmaceutical industry.
That's good. That kind of long-term leadership can be a good sign, but what's the evidence that, like, he and the rest of the team are actually doing a good job?
So their recent performance says it all. They just had a 39% year-over-year increase in revenue for the first quarter of 2024.
Wow.
And they even raised their revenue guidance for the rest of the year.
That's amazing.
It is. That shows that they're very confident in their strategy.
Yeah.
But one thing I really like is their commitment to transparency.
Okay.
Their SEC filings are very detailed, and they have a very robust code of ethics.
So they're not doing anything shady?
Not that we can see.
Okay.
They seem to be playing by the rules, which is always reassuring for investors.
Right.
And they're not just sitting on their cash.
Okay.
They're reinvesting profits into R&D.
Oh, that's good.
They're buying back shares, and they're maintaining a very strong return on equity.
Okay.
And get this, They even have the potential to be acquired by a larger company like AbbVie.
Oh, wow.
So imagine the kind of premium they could command.
That's huge.
It is.
Okay, so the management team seems like they're doing a good job.
Yeah.
But let's get down to the numbers. Chapter 3, financial health. This is where we see if the numbers match the story.
All right, let's crunch some numbers.
Right.
So they have a market cap of $5.8 billion, a price-to-earnings ratio of 41.3x,
Okay.
and a revenue growth of 40%. But those are just numbers. What's really impressive is their 98.44% gross margin.
Wait, 98.44% gross margin.
Wait, 98.44%.
It is.
That's huge.
That's insane.
It tells us that their production costs are super efficient.
Wow.
And to top it off, they have a 0% debt-to-equity ratio.
0%.
They're completely debt-free.
Wow.
And on top of that, they have a ton of free cash flow, around $142.6 million.
Okay.
That gives them so much flexibility to invest in new opportunities.
So they're not just profitable, they're financially stable.
Exactly.
But to get a little bit more specific, what kind of assets and liabilities are we talking about?
Sure. So their assets are pretty typical for a pharmaceutical company.
Okay.
Cash, investments, receivables, and inventory. And their liabilities are mostly accounts payable and some accrued settlements. But overall, their balance sheet looks really healthy.
That's good. What about their growth trajectory? Are they going up?
Absolutely.
Oh.
Their revenue has been going up steadily, from $401.9 million in 2022 to $482.4 million in 2023.
Wow.
And get this, they just announced a record revenue of $182.5 million for Q3 of 2024.
Okay.
Which is a 48% increase year over year.
That's amazing.
It is. And they're also seeing a really good increase in their diluted net income per share, which is a key metric for investors.
So Corcept seems to be doing pretty well financially.
They are.
But is this just hype, or is there actually something real behind all this excitement?
That's a good question.
Well, we'll find out more after a quick break. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all the sources we're using in this deep dive.
Yeah, definitely check them out.
And let us know in the comments what other stocks you're watching.
We'd love to hear. So let's talk about how the market is looking at Corcept.
Okay.
That's chapter 4, market sentiment.
Okay.
Basically, are investors bullish, bearish, somewhere in between?
Yeah, we talked about their stock going up.
Right.
But that doesn't really tell the whole story.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the overall feeling from Wall Street?
Right.
Are analysts optimistic about them?
Well, it seems like the general sentiment is pretty positive.
Right.
A lot of the analysts have actually given Corcept a buy rating.
Okay.
With an average price target of $74.90.
Wow.
Which is about a 35% upside from where the price is right now.
That's a pretty big jump.
Yeah. And of course, price targets are just estimates.
Right.
And they range from $67 to $80.
Okay.
So there's some uncertainty there.
Yeah, of course. So what's making everyone so optimistic?
So a few things. First, their clinical trial results, especially for relacorilant, have been really good.
Relacorilant.
Yeah. It's showing a lot of promise for treating Cushing's syndrome.
Okay.
And there's potential for it to be used for other conditions as well.
Oh, interesting.
And then their revenue growth has been consistently beating expectations.
Right. That's always a good sign.
It is. Investors love that.
Yeah, for sure. What about the people who aren't so optimistic?
Right.
You mentioned short interest earlier.
Yeah.
What does that tell us?
It's always good to look at both sides.
Right.
So short interest data basically tracks how many investors are betting against the stock.
Okay.
So they think the price is going to go down.
Gotcha.
And in Corcept case, there is some short interest.
Okay.
Which means that there are some people who are a bit skeptical.
Okay.
But it's not super negative.
So mixed bag, but leaning towards good.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
It's actually never bad to have some skepticism.
Yeah.
It keeps everybody honest.
For sure. All right, so let's move on to Chapter 5, ownership structure.
Okay.
So who owns Corcept? Who's got skin in the game?
Right. So are we talking individual investors like you and me?
Yeah.
Or are there bigger players?
Right.
So there are definitely some big players involved.
Okay.
Institutional investors.
Like what?
Like mutual funds, pension funds.
Okay.
They actually hold a large percentage of Corcept's stock.
Wow.
And this is usually a pretty good sign.
How come?
Because it means that these investors that have a lot of resources,
right,
they see value in the company.
So the smart money's on Corcept.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
No.
So institutional ownership is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
We also have to look at insider ownership.
What's that?
So that's how much stock is owned by the executives and the board members of the company.
Okay.
You know, the people actually running the company.
Gotcha.
And I would think that that's a good thing.
Yeah, if they're putting their money in it, they must believe in it.
Exactly. So insider ownership is generally seen as positive.
Okay.
Because it means that the management's interests are aligned with the shareholders.
Right.
And for Corcept insider ownership is pretty significant.
Okay.
Which basically suggests that they're all in this together.
Okay, but is there anything bad about that?
Well, one thing to think about is ownership concentration.
Wow, what does that mean?
So if just a small number of investors, whether institutional or insiders, control most of the shares, it could mean that the stock price might be more volatile.
Oh, okay.
That's not always a bad thing, but it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, for sure. So it seems like we've got a mix of institutional and insider ownership.
Yeah.
Which generally seems like a good sign.
It does.
And it seems like they have a good approach to corporate governance as well.
Yeah, they have clear guidelines and charters in place.
So that's good. But let's not get too excited.
Right.
Every investment has risks.
Exactly.
So let's put on our skeptic hats and talk about Chapter 6, risk assessment.
Okay.
We're going to use something called a SWOT analysis to get a balanced view of the company.
Love it. So strengths. What are Corcept's main strengths?
Okay, so we've already talked about some of them.
Yeah.
Their focus on cortisol modulation.
Yeah.
That really sets them apart.
It does.
They have an FDA-approved drug for Cushing's syndrome, which is making good money. And their financials are great.
Yeah.
Profitable, low debt, strong cash flow.
Yep.
And they have an experienced and committed management team.
All good things. But every company has weaknesses.
Right. What about Corcept?
So one that's pretty obvious is their reliance on Korlym.
Okay.
For most of their revenue.
Yeah.
So if something happened to that drug,
right,
like maybe a competitor came out with something better, or if sales just went down, it would really impact them.
Okay, so what else?
Well, their patents for Korlym expire in 2034.
Oh.
Which means that they'll start getting competition from generic versions of the drug.
Oh, okay.
Which is still a while away, but something to remember.
Yep.
And of course, we can't forget about the challenges of the pharmaceutical industry in general.
Right.
Regulatory hurdles, R&D, legal battles.
Right.
It can be tough.
It can. What about their new drug, relacorilant?
Yeah, so relacorilant, it definitely has potential.
Okay.
But like any drug, there are potential side effects.
Right.
Some patients in the trials have reported things like nausea, fatigue, even pain.
Oh, wow.
And we don't know the long-term effects yet.
Yeah, that's always a risk with new drugs.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
What about opportunities for growth?
So there's definitely potential to use Korlym for other things besides Cushing's syndrome.
Okay.
And they're working on new cortisol modulators for all kinds of disorders like cancer, metabolic diseases, even alcohol dependence.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. And remember those huge markets we talked about?
Oncology and endocrinology?
Exactly. Corcept is in a great position to take advantage of that growth.
Yeah.
And then there's also the possibility of them going global.
Oh, yeah.
Through partnerships.
Makes sense.
So lots of exciting possibilities for them.
So lots of opportunities for growth. But what about threats?
Right. So competition is always a threat in this industry.
Yeah.
Other companies are working on treatments for the same things.
Yeah.
And there's always a chance of, like, setbacks in clinical trials.
Yeah.
Unexpected regulatory problems, or even changes in healthcare policies.
That would affect their business.
Exactly. What about those short sellers we talked about?
Oh, yeah. Are they a threat?
Definitely. So their strategies could push the stock price down, make it more volatile, and maybe scare away some investors.
So we've basically looked at everything.
Yeah.
From their strengths and weaknesses to the opportunities and threats.
They've done a full 360.
We have. So the question is Corcept of buy, a hold, or a pass? All right. So we've spent this whole deep dive, like getting to know Corcept.
Yeah, we've really gone deep into their business, their financials, everything.
And we even tried to like look into the future a little bit.
See what's coming down the pipeline.
Exactly. So the big question is, does Corcept like fit into that Warren Buffett value investing style?
Right. Is this a company he would like?
Yeah, because we've been looking for companies that have a strong competitive advantage, a capable management team, and they've actually created value for shareholders.
Right. They have a track record.
Yeah. So let's think back to like what we've talked about. Does Corcept fit the bill?
Well, I think so. Their focus on cortisol modulation is really unique.
Yeah, nobody else is doing that.
Exactly. And they have Korlym, their FDA-approved drug for Cushing's syndrome, which is making them money.
Right. And financially, they're doing great.
Yeah, super profitable, low debt, strong cash flow.
And their management team seems solid.
Very experienced, committed to the company, and they seem to care about the shareholders.
Okay, so they seem to be checking all the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
But the real question is, can they keep this up?
Right. Can they keep growing?
Yeah. What about their future potential?
That's where it gets really interesting. Their pipeline of new drugs is exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Especially relacorilant.
Relacorilant.
Yeah. It's showing a lot of promise, not just for Cushing's syndrome.
For other things, too.
Yeah, like ovarian cancer, even alcohol dependence.
Oh, wow. So they're not just relying on one drug.
No, they're branching out.
That's good. So for our listeners who are thinking about Corcept, what should they be watching for? Like, what are the big things?
So regulatory milestones are huge.
Okay.
Keep an eye on how their new drugs are moving through the FDA process.
Right.
Any good news there could mean the stock goes up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
No.
And obviously, we got to keep track of their financials.
Of course. Are they still hitting their targets? Are they staying financially healthy?
Right. And we can't forget about competition.
Yeah, things change quickly in this industry.
So new companies pop up?
Exactly. New treatments are developed.
So you got to stay informed.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with something to think about.
Okay.
So we've talked about how Corcept is trying to use stress to fight diseases.
Right.
Which is something we all deal with.
Yeah, everyone knows what stress is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So would you bet on this company for the long haul?
That's a good question. Something for everyone to consider.
Yeah, and remember, this is just the beginning.
Right.
We encourage everyone to check out the sources that we linked.
Yeah, do your own research.
And always talk to a financial advisor before making any decisions.
Absolutely.
And if you don't want to miss any of our future deep dives, make sure to hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Thanks for joining us.